Welcome again to another episode of my How Many Paintings Can I Paint in 31 Days series. If you're enjoying this challenge, hit the like, subscribe, notification bell, all the YouTube things so you can stick around. And we have just finished painting an axolotl. If you want to learn more about what on earth this animal is, as well as see me give tips on how to paint transparent animals, you can check out the video above in the cards. Today we are going to be painting a hawk. So we're returning back to the avian side of our diversity of life tree, and we're gonna go paint a hawk. So stay tuned and we're gonna go get started on it. All right, so here we go again. I always start with blocking in colors. You can see this time when I did my chalk outline for the hawk, I captured a lot of the different changing colors of feathers. This is a bit more detail than I would typically do in a chalk outline design, but I wanted to make sure that the different colors of feathers were placed in the right spot, and it's a bit more of a complicated coloration for a bird. So yeah, I just went a little overboard on the chalk outline to help us out here. So I'm using a number 10 Filbert brush, and you can see that I'm trying to get a bit more of a wispy texture in the feathers by keeping the paint on the brush pretty dry, so it's just on the edges there. And then I'm trying to just mix a bunch of different shades of brown to try and get the base of where different colors are going to be. So you can see I kind of get those really loose, wispy dragging feathers out when I turn my brush completely to the front. They're kind of off the left side of the wing there. And then we're just trying to get some of the darker patches in. So yeah, I'm gonna slow it down a little bit and you can see a little bit of real-time footage. This is something that's been commonly requested in some of my videos. So this time I included the small parts of real-time footage that I always film for the introduction parts of the video. So you can kind of see real time kind of what the progress is looking like. And I'm very gently, barely touching the background, barely touching the canvas, kind of loosely dragging the brush across it, trying to get those really wispy, light strands. And I always start building up the texture of my animals from the very first layer. So some people do a whole wash of one color. Sometimes I do that, but I really try and use all of the possible strokes that you have in a painting to increase the texture. And this is something when you're working in layers and when you're working in more transparent colors of paint is really essential, because you can kind of see through to those different underlayers, and they really help add the direction of the fur or feathers in this case. Oh yeah, the feet were way too yellow the first pass. That's an uncomfortable color. This bird in the reference image was actually perched on somebody's arm, funny enough. So this branch I'm entirely making up. I looked at a few different reference images for it, but this is definitely a part of the painting that I got pretty hung up on. But yeah, I was trying to work in with the talons and play with some of the texture there. Now I'm kind of blocking in this branch, and this color is way too dark. I did do a lot to lighten it up. And you can kind of see here how I'm painting the bottom of the canvas and the sides. And then, yeah, I basically have this default pattern for really quick bark that I use, where I just do big patches and then you kind of want to build up those color layers. So I did a lot of it off camera. But yeah, I basically kind of did a few layers of the bark, and then I went back through and I added these different lines over top of it. So now we're kind of going over in a softer brown, trying to tone out the saturation of the branch because it was really kind of overpowering the other colors in the hawk. I was really trying to take a bit of a shortcut on the branch, and it kind of bit me. I wish I kind of just did it a bit slower. I was a little impatient and ended up repainting it quite a few amount of times because I was unhappy with how it was looking. And we're gonna leave it for the moment and move on to the feet. So I wanted a more pale yellow brown color, and I'm just using little tiny dots to try and build up the more scaly texture that birds have on their feet. And some of the toes weren't necessarily shown, so I was kind of playing around with their orientation on the wood and where I thought they would grasp the wood. And yeah, so it's for some more real-time footage. This is how we are painting the texture and just kind of building it up over time. I start with a really light color, and we just add little tiny dots, and then I do washes of different transparent color over top of it. Now we're kind of adding more yellow in, and it's just kind of a continuous process until you can build up the different layers of doing highlights, knocking it back with color, and this whole process. So especially on the nails of the Talons, they're quite shiny. They have a good reflection off of them. So this was really interesting, trying to paint them in and get the texture looking right and the angle of the claws right for where it was digging into the wood or not. And now we get to move on to the eyes. Avians in general just have such stunning eyes. Birds just have amazing eyes. This one was really fun. So you can see I'm going in through the process of doing a bunch of lines, spiraling into the center. Then I kind of go back and add the pupil in, add the ring that they always have around their eyes, and then we start doing different washes of browns and golden colors to try and really build in that eye. We go back over with white, we go back over with the color, and it's just an ongoing process of trying to add those highlights and shadows. And I really wanted a strong blue reflection to kind of help pair off with the background. And of course, the dots always add a little bit of extra sparkle to the eye. The beak was probably the part of the painting that I was most happy with. It came together very quickly. It's a pretty fun, flaky texture to paint, and I really enjoyed creating it. And it's just a nice soft gray into that soft pale yellow tone with the highlight on the side. And it came together really well. So it was pretty quick to paint the beak. Now we get to go back and do a lot of the wash of the feathers to try and get more color into them. So I have a bit of a thinner brush. It's not super thin like a liner brush, but I was going around and just trying to add some of the more finer feather details with it quickly around the face. So it's kind of funny because feathers do have a very interesting structure. When you're really up close to them, they all kind of lock together and just kind of have like their tips that kind of poke out. But for a species like this, you can really see the different strands of like the individual filaments of the feathers. And it's really tricky to make it look like feathers and not like fur when you're just doing soft little lines. So the main thing I was trying to prioritize here was the difference between the edges of the feathers and the kind of darker, richer middle portion of the feather that's more of like a deep brown. So I have an old, pretty cheap paintbrush. I don't know, I've had this one in my kit for a while. I sometimes grab it. And it was just like a really nice size for the size of the feathers I wanted to do. And you can see it's kind of splayed into 4 or 5 strands there. So I use this brush a lot to kind of add more of the wispy edges to a lot of my feathers. And old brushes are just great for this kind of stuff. Like you can paint a lot of textures really quickly with bigger brushes that are just really splayed out. And I think now I have switched to a liner brush just to gain a little bit more control when you're doing the finer details. And now for my wash of color, I'm using back to my number 10 Filbert. This brush I paint with the most. If you've watched my other videos and painting tutorials, you'll always see it. Like this same brush lasted me this whole month of all these other paintings, and they pretty much have a lifespan of about 6 months before I kind of retired them to the more splayed work. And yeah, because it's tricky to preserve that really fine edge that you need for some work with the number 10 Filbert. But for color washes, they just work great. You can cover such a large area and still really control it with the way you can angle the brush. We're just doing a mix of yellow brown, red brown, kind of golden tones in the hawk. Really trying to get a good contrast with the kind of oranger coloration of the bird against the blue, the sky blue, bright daylight background. So we're going in with a liner brush and adding those finer details here again. And I really enjoyed capturing the really bright, wispy fur, especially on the chest of the bird. So you can kind of see how those longer strokes kind of go in different directions. right in the chest, and it was really fun to kind of put in those details. It's always satisfying because I always save your brightest white until you're closer to the finishing stages of the painting so that you can really make those highlights punch out and you still have your brightest color kind of set aside the whole portion of your painting so that you're able to kind of really make your whites punch out when you want them to at the very end, the finishing touches of your painting. We're doing a little bit of work off the top left side of the screen, but I moved down soon. It's hard always to know what is in frame when you're trying to get the more higher resolution detailed shots, so I apologize for that. But yeah, you can kind of see a closer up view of what I'm doing with the liner brush, getting those long wispy strokes. And I'm basically reapplying paint to my brush maybe every 10 painting strokes to give you an idea of the consistency that I kind of have. And this was really fun, trying to add the darker feathers that peek through at the bottom. And I got a little carried away based on what was kind of blocked in, and I wasn't really looking at my reference photo, so you can see me kind of go back and fill in some with white and then... But what's really cool about it is you can see the difference when I've covered up some that I didn't really like. I've kind of left it so that you can see the transparentness behind it, and it actually adds a lot of depth to the feathers. So it looks like there's layers of the lighter color feathers kind of covering up a darker spot at the top and some of the different edges there. And that really kind of almost accidentally helped add a lot of depth and perspective to the painting. So then I went back in with white and I covered up more of it so you can really kind of see the layering of feathers as we're going up the body of the bird. And we're just doing really light washes of white and really soft brown tones just to kind of warm up the space and make sure everything is a really warm color palette, especially in the middle, so that it's able to really punch through and be forward in the painting, you know, give it that extra depth of field. Liner brushes are one of my favorite things to paint with. They're just so precise, but it's really hard to not fall into the trap and save them until the end, finishing details. Because if you jump into your liner brush too soon, the painting will take you ages. So try and use an old splayed brush for as much as you can, and that just saves you so much time in this process. But liner brushes are perfect for the finishing little details. And this is the end of the hawk painting. I hope you enjoyed me creating a hawk for you today. And this painting was actually finished over 2 and a bit days, largely because feathers are really complicated. And also this painting actually sold through Instagram partway through, so it sold before it was finished. And that I fell back into the same pressure of trying to make it like really, really good for the client. So it got a little sidetracked and I spent a little too long on this. But today is the 29th. We have 3 days left in January. We have 3 paintings left to hit 20 paintings, which is a nice, you know, rounded number. So I think that's what we're gonna go for. So today we are going to be painting a sloth, commonly requested, and we'll get over to that video. And I hope you enjoyed watching this one. And you can check out the playlist for the rest of the videos up above. Thanks for watching.